The moment that bracelet surfaced, the entire story everyone believed about Princess Diana shattered into pieces, and the most dangerous part wasn't the jewelry, it was the lie buried underneath it. Laura Lopez didn't just walk into that quiet antique shop by accident. She walked in carrying a secret she thought was already dead and buried forever. 2 pieces. That's all it took. A sapphire and pearl bracelet, and a pendant that should not have existed anymore. She thought they were untraceable, invisible, erased by time. But the second those pieces touched the appraiser's hands, something shifted. Not suspicion, recognition. The kind that crawls under your skin and refuses to leave. Because this wasn't just jewelry. This was history that had been deliberately silenced. The appraiser didn't panic immediately. She froze, because deep in her memory, buried under years of ordinary life, was something she had seen before, something she wasn't supposed to see. A photograph, hidden, forgotten, taken from a place no outsider should ever access. Her grandmother's belongings. A palace seamstress. A woman who had seen things but never spoke. And now, suddenly, everything was connecting in the most disturbing way possible. She pulled that photo out with trembling hands, compared it, looked again. There was no doubt. No room for coincidence. The match was exact. The same bracelet, the same design, the same royal presence frozen in time beside a woman the world never stopped mourning. And right there, in that silent shop, the truth began to crack open. She had a choice. Let it go, take the money, stay quiet, protect her family from being dragged into something far bigger than her. Or expose it, tear open a secret that had clearly been buried on purpose. For a moment, just a moment, she almost chose silence. But something stopped her. Something about the weight of that bracelet, the feeling that it didn't belong in that room, that it wasn't supposed to be sold, handled, or even seen. And in that split-second decision, she didn't call back to approve the sale. She called someone else. And that single call didn't just alert the system, it detonated it. Within hours, that image bracelet beside the old court photograph landed directly in front of Prince William. And the moment he saw it, something inside him didn't just react. It broke. Because he knew. He didn't need confirmation. He didn't need experts. He knew exactly what he was looking at. His mother's jewelry. The same pieces he had been told were gone forever. Destroyed, reduced to ash in some quiet, tragic accident that no one ever questioned. But here they were. Alive, real, and in the hands of someone who had absolutely no right to them. That's when memory hit him like a storm he had spent years trying to outrun. A room, a confrontation, a younger version of himself standing there, powerless, watching as those same pieces were taken away, locked up. Removed, silenced, he remembered the anger, the confusion, the helplessness, and most of all, he remembered being ignored. And now, decades later, the truth was staring back at him, not burned, not lost, not gone. Hidden, which raises a far more dangerous question: who decided to erase them? Because when his legal team dug into the records, what they found wasn't just an error. It was something colder, something intentional. A documented claim that the jewelry had been destroyed in a fire, but there was no fire, no record, no report, no evidence anywhere in palace history, just a lie. Written, filed, accepted, and left untouched for over 20 years. Think about that for a second. Someone didn't just misplace those pieces, they erased them from existence. On paper. Officially, cleanly. As if they had never mattered. As if they had never belonged to one of the most watched women in the world. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. And William didn't hesitate. Meetings canceled. Calls made. The kind of lawyers brought in that don't deal with family disagreements, they deal with buried secrets. Because this wasn't about jewelry anymore. This was about truth. About control. About a story that had been rewritten without his permission. And the most shocking part? He didn't keep it quiet. He didn't protect the image. He didn't contain the damage. He exposed it. Because somewhere in that moment, the line had already been crossed. And once that happens, there's no going back to silence. Something had been taken from him years ago. And now, piece by piece, it was coming back, but not the way anyone expected. And just when it seemed like the truth had finally surfaced, something even darker began to emerge behind it. And just when it looked like the storm had already done its worst, it shifted. it deepened. Because what started as two pieces of jewelry didn't stay contained, it spread, revealing something far more calculated, far more deliberate, and far more dangerous than anyone inside the palace was prepared to face. Investigators didn't just stop at the bracelet and pendant, they kept digging, and the deeper they went, the more uncomfortable the truth became. Because those two pieces, they were never the full story. They were just the first crack in something much bigger that had been carefully sealed for decades. Records were pulled. Old inventory logs were cross-checked against what actually remained inside royal vaults. And that's when the pattern began to emerge: not random losses, not clerical mistakes, but precise disappearances. A diamond hairpin once worn by Princess Diana vanished from documentation after a certain year. An emerald ring she was known to wear regularly, gone in the exact same time window as the bracelet. Piece after piece, quietly slipping out of existence without triggering a single alarm. That doesn't happen by accident. That requires access, knowledge, timing. Someone who understood the system from the inside and knew exactly how to bend it without breaking it. And suddenly, the question wasn't who took the jewelry. It was who helped make it disappear. Because the trail didn't end inside the palace, it stretched far beyond it. Investigators followed financial movements, traced transactions, and what they found waiting at the end of that trail was something nobody could ignore. A private holding company, registered overseas, carefully distanced from royal oversight. A place where assets could sit untouched, unchallenged, and most importantly, unquestioned. But it wasn't the company itself that shook them. It was the name behind it. A name tied directly to the House of Windsor, a relative who had already walked away from the family after a bitter collapse in relationships. A man who had spent years in silence, carrying grievances that eventually erupted into public accusations, interviews, and revelations that had already damaged the family's image across the world. And now, somehow, his shadow was appearing in a completely different kind of scandal, one that reached back decades instead of headlines. The connection wasn't officially confirmed, not yet. But it was strong enough to make investigators pause, strong enough to make them hesitate before putting it on record. Because naming him wouldn't just expose a link, it would ignite something far more explosive, something that could tear through what little stability the family still had left. So they held it back, sealed it, buried it in restricted filings where only a handful of people could see the full picture. And that silence, that deliberate decision not to reveal the name, it said more than any public accusation ever could. Because when the truth is too dangerous to speak out loud, it means the consequences of exposing it are bigger than anyone is willing to handle. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the damage was already done. Queen Camilla was no longer dealing with a controllable narrative. This wasn't a headline that could be softened or redirected. Her daughter's situation had spiraled beyond influence, beyond protection, and most importantly, beyond denial. The legal freeze, the seizure. The exposure had stripped away every layer of control she had spent decades building. And when she finally stood face to face with Prince William, there was no negotiation left, no room for compromise, just a cold, final understanding that whatever power she thought she had over this story was gone. But even that confrontation wasn't the end. Because the deeper truth still hadn't surfaced completely. There were still missing pieces, still records that didn't align, still names that hadn't been spoken. And somewhere out there, beyond the reach of palace lawyers and controlled statements, were items that should have never left royal hands in the first place. Items tied to a legacy that had already been tampered with once, and could be again. So William made his move, not quietly, not privately, but in full view. He locked down what remained, built protections around it so tight that no one outside his direct control could ever access those belongings again. On the surface, it looked like a decisive end, a clean resolution, a son reclaiming what was taken from his mother. But underneath, nothing was actually finished. Because the truth didn't fully come back with those recovered pieces. It stayed fragmented, scattered across years of silence, hidden transactions, and decisions that were never meant to be questioned. The second name still hasn't been revealed. The overseas trail hasn't been fully closed. And the most unsettling part of all, the realization that this was never just one person acting alone.